and Hair Technologies, powered by Pando Corporation, brought to you by Grey Orange, and supported by LSC. We would like to thank our registration partner, MapMy India, CX partner Zendex, session partner Shiplight, silver partner Petron, knowledge partner Supply Chain Labs, and industry partner PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. My name is Sriraj Deshmukh, and I will be your host for this session. We are now moving on to our next session on identifying problems and solutions to improve Indian logistics for pharma, vaccines, and drugs. I would like to introduce you to the moderator of this session, Mr. Parvesh Ghai, who is the Vice President Sales at Pando Corporation. Next, I would like to welcome the panelist, Mr. Tanmay Saksena, COO at One Engine, Mr. Sreenivas Rao, Global Head, Supply Chain, Sun Pharmaceutical Industries, Mr. Nigel Dsouza, National Healthcare Solution Manager at Aramex India, Mr. Vikram Paul, Head of Global Pharmaceutical and Healthcare Development, Rhenus Logistics India. And last but not the least, Dr. Ravi Prakash Mathur, Vice President and Global Head of Logistics and Supply Chain Excellence at Dr. Reddy's lab. We welcome all of you, and I would request Mr. Parvesh to take over from here.
Thank you, Sriraj. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. Thank you for joining this panel discussion to talk about the possibilities of transformation in the supply chain execution. I'll start by setting that context that, as we all know, over last 12 to 18 months, COVID-19 pandemic has created an unprecedented disruption across all the industries. And I think the impact of this may likely to continue for many, many years to come. I think, as we all know, this is once in a lifetime kind of event that we are experiencing. And pharma companies typically what we are seeing is are experiencing a fairly challenging environment that on one side there is huge volatility in demand, and on other side we are also seeing quite a bit of supply side disruptions, and the business environment remains under quite a bit of pressure to be able to get products delivered to patients at the same time, do it while trying to keep their employees safe and operations running. Right. What we are also seeing is that leading pharma companies are seeing this current environment as an opportunity to be able to transform the whole supply chain area, execution in particular, customer experience and operational efficiency to service the customers are always critical from the supply chain standpoint, especially also for pharma industry in India, given its global reach and presence. Additionally, what we are also seeing is that growing regulatory requirements, whether these are direct or have some bit of indirect effect on the supply chain in all the areas, whether it's around distribution, transportation, warehousing. We all understand at a time when the cost control is critical, a reimagination of supply chain logistics can really deliver the resilience and the efficiency which is needed for the pharma business for the next normal. I'm not using the word new normal. I'm still saying that we might still be in the middle of pandemic with the expected maybe third wave. So as and when we have the next normal, whether it's still the third wave or post-pandemic getting settled, if companies start making smart investments to be able to minimize these costly disruptions before they occur, I think they can really, really create a big impact in the way they run their business and create a customer experience overall. So talk about the strategies to build resilient supply chain and logistics. We have a panel of esteemed supply chain leaders from the industry. Maybe I'll start by asking each one of them to be able to give us a brief, quick overview, introduction very briefly about their business, while we know, all the large leading organizations in pharma, as well as highlight and talk to us about how is this current business environment evolving in the Indian pharma industry, and what are the trends they are specifically observing around the supply chain execution side. So let me start with Sreenivas Rao from Sun to be able to give us a quick perspective, and then I'll go to the other panelists, just to be able to talk through, giving us a brief, quick overview.
Thank you. Thanks, Parvesh. And it's actually a pleasure and honor to be on the panel here along with all the esteemed panelists, and glad to actually speak on the platform yet again this year. So, all of you would be aware that, Sun is one of the the largest organization in the country, I would say, for all the pharmaceutical products, and we operate globally in more than 100 countries. Pandemic has actually played a very important role in terms of shifting the manufacturing of drugs and actually transporting of those drugs, which were actually more COVID related, and also more in terms of the long-term therapies also. Yeah. So indeed, what has pandemic done? All of us have actually gone through multiple times over on this particular, not just on this particular space, but also in various other places, exactly as to what has pandemic done. Some of the key learnings which we have taken as an organization in terms of the planning. Uh, to be honest with you, I actually am not a hardcore pharmaceutical guy. I came in from, the FMCG companies, and I used to think that what is it that, why is it that we operate with inventories which are so much higher as compared to the FMCG industry? Post pandemic, I must say that I am also actually getting converted myself into not necessarily holding inventories which are just in time. Yeah. While just in time did have a role to play in its own this thing, capital is becoming cheaper. Holding up inventories for the purposes of actually saving the lives and health of the people is far more important. That's a very, very big learning in my opinion. Yeah. Because I also have actually seen that, for example, a lot of these governments in the Western world, they do a lot of stocking of those particular inventories for the purposes of emergency sake. Yeah. So just in time is one of those concepts, to be super honest with you, is definitely not applicable in the pharma world. Yeah. While it is important to optimize the inventories, while it is important to have right, distribution of inventories, but having just in time is one of the learnings which I personally and we as a company also felt that maybe not one of the best strategies to have. Can we plan for a black swan event like this pandemic? Definitely not. Yeah, but can we actually? Can we not plan? We cannot plan and prepare for it, but we need to have it at the back of our minds to make sure that we are not caught unaware. So these are the learnings, some of the learnings for a global organization like us. Yeah, two of our large markets, both India as well as United States, we were impacted dramatically, and the demand of drugs keep changing, and the regulators keep following up with us in terms of why and when are those things actually going to come. And take an example of the wave two, when the drugs were not being available to the patients and so on and so forth. I do not want to get into the full details. I would leave it for the other panelists also to speak about it. But the kind of pressures which we actually go through are very different to that of the pressures which non-pharmaceutical companies would go through. Yeah, and the sudden peaking demand of, as we speak, for example, the drug which is used for black fungus, amphotericin, is so high that there is no place, there's no company which is able to manufacture and supply to the requirement of the patients.
Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Thanks, Shani. I think good perspective, and it's good to hear that for a change that high inventory levels helped at least across the globe for Sun to be able to help to save lives in the respective countries, right? Especially during this tough situation of the second wave. Tanmay, can I just move over to you to be able to give your opening comments to be able to help us just walk through what are the overall environment that you're seeing, how things are evolving in the kind of business you anyway are in a very, very dynamic kind of environment, and what are the trends you are seeing on the supply chain execution side?
Yeah, sure. I think we all are in a dynamic environment, so I don't think we are an exception there. But I think for us, because we are consumer facing and consumer focused, I think the impact is felt the most in terms of what is expected, what is required, and particularly what the pandemic has forced the people or the consumers to do. And just to be clear, now 1mg or Tata 1mg is not just in the business of delivering medicines at home, but we have been into diagnostics testing as well, a fact which is probably lesser known, but was certainly underscored during the pandemic when there was a massive requirement for testing at home. And the common theme for all of these things, whether it was medicine delivery at home or testing at home for RT-PCR tests or antigen tests, the core learning for us was that clearly digital healthcare and healthcare at home suddenly saw a newfound recognition and an acceptance because the event was such that it naturally lent itself very well to people not going out to pharmacies to buy things and expose themselves, or going out to labs to test themselves. And we could truly see all the things that we had always spoken about really come to fruition during this period, right? And I think the expectations of the consumers didn't go down, even with the fact that there was all the massive sort of peak demand effect and supply chains being stressed and completely sort of shaken up. But that really didn't change the expectations from the consumer. So we had to very, very quickly adapt ourselves, invest heavily into various portions of the supply chain to meet those expectations. One example of that being that for us, molecular biology testing was barely anything as a percentage of business. And during the 2 months of the second wave, we probably became one of the largest molecular biology testing labs in the country, having done invested in getting RT-PCR machines, getting the right expertise, getting industry pathologists to work on these things, and associated peak on the drugs needed during this time, like what was mentioned, amphotericin was one, tocilizumab. Like there was just sort of massive peaking around these particular salts and testing, and the supply chain had to go through some major investments and revamp to continue to meet consumer demands, where we did not see any softening of the expectations, so to speak. So that was, I think, a really great period, and I think that has allowed us to now be in a position post those investments to be better prepared for the third wave and continue to service our consumers beyond that as well.
Got it. Thanks, Tanmay. I completely agree. I think without the huge digital healthcare infrastructure and trying to reach out to large number of people at their home, right, both for testing as well as delivering the medicines, I don't think so we would have been able to cater in the way country managed, despite a very challenging environment during the second wave. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, Tanmay. Dr. Mathur, let me move to you. If you could share your thoughts as well, in terms of, what are the overall trends that you're seeing. I'll specifically request if you can talk about what are the challenges that you're seeing in the supply chain, and what are the possible workarounds, transformation, investment solutions that you have tried to work around with over the last, say, 12 to 18 months in this very volatile or a dynamic kind of environment. I think those insights will be good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Parvesh. Great question. And I'll take that. I'll start with, a comment. Like most people nowadays, I start my day by opening my phone and just trying to Google how many new cases were there yesterday. Okay, that's, I think, the routine that is there with most of us.
True.
And when I do that, pops up a graph that is, wave one and wave two. And you see, the wave one was like wave little longer, but the peak was not much. But wave two, of course, has a huge spike. Now, as a supply chain person, what exactly it means to you is that you see, hey, there's a demand spike. Okay, this is not just a spike in the new cases for the people associated with the pharma world, whether in supply chain or logistics. This is an alarm bell which is telling you this is an unprecedented spike in your business. Now extrapolate that, we all know that in our businesses, there is something which we know as the bullwhip effect, which means that when this demand signal, which is such a spike, it might or might not be a spike, any demand signal, once it goes back into your different nodes in your supply chain, it amplifies. Okay. Now, number one, if I just look at finished goods, okay, that itself is a huge challenge. If I were just had no more challenges on API and other raw materials, that FG itself is a challenge. How do you take care of that? Correct? The other thing is that in the last 12 months or so, there have been different views of different therapies. So you really cannot, something that is recommended by the health regulators today, tomorrow is not a recommended drug, at all. Then there comes another study that says, no, in this particular environment, this drug, in this kind of, patients, this drug is actually working. So what kind of a demand is you going to expect on a SKU level? That is really not clear, okay? So that is a very basic challenge. Now, to be able to gear up those supplies at a very fast pace, and the kind of fire the pharma world was when so many drugs were not over there, and people were doing all sort of practices, and there was a lot of fire all around. Uh, Imagine what it means to the API source, the active pharmaceutical ingredient. You just can't scale up your FG production in because your API is not available. Similarly, you can't manufacture your API if your starting material or your intermediates are not available. Okay, people were like, of course, very anxious, but they also should realize that along it being a demand challenge, it is also a supply challenge. And it's very difficult to create a supply chain that is so agile, and without resorting to what Srini was pointing about, without stocking up inventory. Because if you don't have inventory, not only of your finished goods, but of all each and every manufacturing step where you are vertically there or integrated or you're not integrated, unless there's inventory available, is very difficult. So your planning processes in per se have to change. The old way of planning and running a demand planning engine or a supply planning engine, that those days are over. Okay, those steady state flow of demand and steady state flow of supplies, those algorithms cannot solve for your problems, unless you bring in that technology that give you two capabilities. One, to be able to plan for scenarios, to be able to predict scenarios, to be able to plan for scenarios. And number two, you have a supply visibility. Your present technologies are more focused on demand forecasting, and what KPIs are more about demand accuracy and all that. We are a shift to supply forecasting. So these are the two things from a paradigm shift that the business needs to do. And also imagine what it means to the 3PL person. All of a sudden, you have 1 million more units to store. You run out of warehousing space, and then you go through your service provider. And he says, sorry, I don't have this temperature controlled facility available. You never told me this demand is going to come. And there is no way you could have told him because you did not know it yourself. So these are challenging times, but the good thing is that we are aware that these are challenging times, and we'll find ways to kind of overcome.
Sure. Got it. No, I think trying to capture the high level or a macro demand signals and then trying to get prepared to be able to cater to the spikes on the supply side as well as the inventory and the whole dynamic planning that you spoke about. I think those are very, very interesting aspects. Can I ask just one follow-up question, Dr. Mathur, to you? While we do understand the agility which is required on the planning side, you did speak about how did you collaborate, partner, or the challenges that 3PL partners for you faced. Any specific insights that you can talk about on the supply chain execution side, specifically around the whole warehousing, transportation, distribution side of things, in terms of what are the kind of challenges and how do you navigate or overcome those challenges?
So I think the most important thing over here is, that you have to look out for new solutions, and you have to be very agile and very quick in decision making when you adapt those solutions. For example, in the pre-COVID era, you were used to working with long-term airline contracts, right?
Correct.
Now, in the lockdown period, that paradigm was not there at all, and you had to be on a lookout for very short window opportunities that were coming up, and these will come to you with a very short notice. They will say, okay, next week there's a charter flying out of Mumbai. Do you want to take it? Okay, or day after tomorrow, there is some space available on a charter that is flying out of Delhi. So you have to think on your feet. You have to take your calls, and at the same time, you have to ensure that you're compliant in terms of your quality requirements and all that. That is one. And if somebody comes up to you with a new solution, okay, this is the kind of say I'll take an example of the vaccine distribution that we are doing right now. And we have formulated a box, created a insulated box that works at -20. But that's a very small MOQ. Now, I can handle bigger MOQs with you, but those solutions are not available in India. But if you back me up, I will get that technology into India. We'll adapt that to the domestic environment. We'll take the necessary permission from customs and all that. Then you have to say, okay, yes, I'm interested. We'll be able to do that. And also re-engineer processes. So be on the lookout for new solutions, be very fast, be very agile. That is the way we have to handle this.
Perfect. Understood. I think it sounds quite interesting. So this actually gives us a good segue to go to Vikram, would you want to talk about, specifically in context of what Dr. Mathur spoke, specifically around the complexity of this whole vaccine distribution from supply chain, purely execution perspective, right? Storage, warehousing, transportation, with the kind of restrictions around maintaining the temperatures that it comes along with. How Rhenus is trying to collaborate, partner with pharma companies to be able to address and navigate this challenge.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Parvesh, first of all, also for moderating the session. Great to be on such a learned and experienced panel, and good morning to all the delegates that are listening in as well. So, from Rhenus Logistics' point of view, one of the views that we took right in the middle of the pandemic was obviously to try and understand what additional features and functionality we needed to add onto a fairly global, robust healthcare platform that we had in the way of 3PL and LSP. And what we've seen is that one of the requirements that's almost kind of a necessity and compulsory when you go into managing, vaccine distribution, etc., is real-time monitoring end-to-end. So there is a structure that's come up, client-facing structure that's come up in the way of a control tower, where you essentially run real-time monitoring on a global level for all clients that are working with you on temperature-controlled product. And what we did on that control tower structure is also backed it up with a very solid QMS structure, quality management system structure, which basically pulls together all of the compliance and certifications that we have, all the standards that are prevalent in each of the countries where we kind of focus our client attention in terms of our competency and know-how, and to be able to put it together into a really a real-time, handling and escalation and monitoring process that is there. So that's one of the biggest areas where we have invested, where we have seen a change, and it's also because of the fact that this is almost one of the conditions which is a deal breaker as far as RFQs and RFPs are concerned. The other part which goes to technology also that I want to talk about a little bit is to basically handle the issue of training and resource management. So today, on the back of an online, and most of our training programs have gone online at this point of time. Everything that we had in the real world pre-pandemic. What we have done there is really built a end-to-end. So starting from operational, going into execution, going into obviously business development as well. An online training module that is almost running simultaneous to our sales and business development global training module that speaks to all of the know-how and all of the knowledge that you need to have with regards to essentially temperature control management in all parts of the world.
Got it.
So, these are the two most exciting projects that we worked on in this period of time that are responding to what our clients want to see and what they hold as very dear to their supply chain integrity as well.
Got it. Thanks, Vikram. I think the control tower as well as the whole QMS platform that you have created sounds quite interesting insights, and possibly I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this, the webcast, they will take clue from this discussion and see, how they can leverage some of those capabilities which are being built in. Let me come to you, Nigel. Would you want to give us another few examples, Nigel, that how you partner and collaborate, with various pharma companies or manufacturing companies, and what are the kind of new innovations that you have brought in over, let's say, last year and a half, helping them to be able to navigate through this dynamic or a volatile demand supply kind of environment? I think it'll be good to hear your thoughts.
Thank you for the question, Parvesh, and good morning to everyone, panelists and the participants hearing this webinar. Well, I'll start off by saying the current situation only reconfirms that we really all live in a connected world, because an events happening somewhere does affect us all in some shape or form. In regards to what Aramex as a network has done in terms of the current situation to help our partners in the pharma world, I'll just take away a few things that Dr. Mathur did say in terms of the short window span, in terms of movement of material, we did realize and recognize this fact. And as a network of global network of Aramex, what we did was we did invest and increase the number of charters that we were operating globally. In fact, from an India point of view specifically, we tied up with charter companies and we were ready to move out of specific locations, namely Hyderabad, Bangalore, wherever we believed from a customer standpoint of view, there would be a need for movement. Also, what we did is as Doctor mentioned, in terms of the requirement of APIs, reagents, etc., coming into the country, as we are reliant on them, we also looked at defined containers and ULDs on heavy traffic lanes for these movements. So as an organization, we did invest in with airlines getting on ULDs and containers on board. So making sure that as and when a need did arise, we had the space or the capacity to provide for with regards to these requirements. In sense of readiness, so we do understand everything or most of the things around this subject would be temperature controlled, and as Paul did mention, it's very critical for us to have real-time information. So as a network, again, we too have invested with partners who have real-time data loggers, wherein at a click of a button, we as the user as well as the pharma company could be given access in terms of reading the temperatures. I would say we went a little bit ahead in terms of trying to give a holistic solution. Is we are looking at a whole range of smart products that will be out very, very shortly. So we're looking at a smart box, we're looking at a smart panel, wherein the customer sees real-time visibility across the chain. And I'll just take 2 minutes and not much more to explain this, because there's a lot of technology. Since this is a tech bit, there's a lot of technology which actually goes behind this kind of movement. So when we say logistics, I like to call this business as a technical operation.
Right, only one request. Maybe I'll request to try and keep it in brief. I still have few more thoughts that I wanted to get from the participants, but it'll be still good to hear a little bit of thoughts from your side. Please go ahead.
So in terms of the smart solution offering, we are going to have a visibility across the board, wherein not only in terms of product temperature, but the environment around also will be visible, because this affects the temperature inside. So more of a proactive kind of solution that we're looking at. Sure. And I will share this all with the rest of the panel in short time.
Sure. Thanks, Nigel. I'm sure that real-time visibility in a globalized kind of environment will surely help. Dr. Mathur, just coming to you, can you give one or two specific examples? You spoke about trying the need or the context of moving away from a static planning to a very dynamic kind of planning environment, specifically around execution side, transportation, warehousing, distribution. Can you talk about one or two examples where technology could play a role to be able to address, streamline and address some of these challenging or dynamic environment that you as a large global pharmaceutical company face today?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Parvesh. That is something really I've been thinking about and really wanted to actually also share on a forum like this. Now, the technologies, they are there. There is nothing new that I have to add to that point. There are IoT technologies, there are track and trace technologies, there are technologies around collaboration, there are technologies that our partners on the 3PL world have, where their platforms integrate with your purchase orders, with your invoicing, also create an end-to-end visibility layer, that help you in your planning process as such. But what I like to kind of, and then there are those transportation, TMSs, kind of solutions where you create transportation orders, just as a supply chain person creates a production order or a purchase order. Similarly, you have that kind of a thought process in terms of digital processes on your ERP. Those things are there. But now, this being a technology forum, I would like to take this opportunity to kind of also talk about the gaps which are there, and also maybe if I could help by sharing my thoughts and, leave the thought leaders on this forum and in the audience with certain ideas, probably they can work on, probably they can start thinking about those. Then maybe we start addressing those concerns at a much broader level in the industry. Now, the comment that I want to make over here is, many a times these solutions or the products or like these smart tech technologies that Nigel was talking about, they're often conceived as, or created as kind of products. Okay, so for example, an IoT device. I'll just take a very simple example. These when these are created, and when the platform is created for integrating this kind of an IoT devices, the thought process behind that is you're creating a product. Okay. Now the paradigm that we have to really be thinking about is that technology cannot be a product that can be taken off the shelf. It has to interweave with your business process. Okay. And business processes can be very complex. Business processes can be very customized to the business that you are trying to apply the technology in. Now, if I take the case of, say, pharma supply chain, there is no one single scenario, even as far as logistics is concerned. Okay. If I just take the case of India, this is a multi-layered supply chain. Okay. So you will normally have a central distribution system. You will have a layer of regional warehouses. You will have a distribution layer in between till the time you reach the chemist, and at the end the very fag end you have the customer. Okay, so there are multiple touch points. Okay, so if you are designing a technology that is fits in only into point A and point B, it's not going to work. Now, the reason I'm talking about the multiple layers is that at every point there is a process of aggregation and there's a process of disaggregation. Okay, and the process of aggregation and disaggregation, they could be at the level of physical goods, at the level of your purchase orders, at the level of your invoices, and your technology or your product has to shake the hands or interface with these processes of aggregation and disaggregation at multiple layers. Okay, so unless your digital platform is able to handle the complexities of not one supply chain, but of multiple supply chains within the same ecosystem, bring in the complexity that there are multiple modes. You have small parcels, you have point-to-point air shipments, you have full truck loads, you have part truck loads, you have milk runs, you have you have the long haul, you have the last mile. Imagine the landscape is so complex. Okay, so whatever product you're trying to bring in, it has to kind of fit into the entire complexity. And I'm sharing it from from my experience that it is very difficult unless you come with a process consulting experience. Unless you have a very good expertise in understanding business processes, it'll be very difficult to stitch in. It's very difficult to stitch in a technology product into a live working supply chain. You're in tech terms, you're right away, straight away working in a production environment. There is no quality testing available for you over here.
Good.
Okay?
Good.
So stitch in the technology with the complexity of the supply chain.
Sure.
Focus on that. That is what I want to leave the idea.
This was very interesting perspective, Dr. Mathur, in terms of trying to have an execution layer which caters to primary, secondary, last mile, and a multimodal kind of environment in a global context for you as a large global pharma organization. I think it does bring in complexities, but I confidently believe there are a lot of technologies which can help to navigate these challenges. And I'm sure we will talk about some of these, as we move along. Tanmay, thank you so much, Dr. Mathur. I think quite interesting insights. Tanmay, let me quickly come to you. You are an organization which is very customer focused organization. And I'm sure when the second wave was at the peak, whether it is from the testing perspective or from the medicine delivery perspective, right? You would have faced significant chunk of last mile delivery challenges, right? How did you leverage technology or reorient yourself or the processes in terms of bringing in efficiencies to be able to cater to the expected surge and still not drop the service levels or not let the customer experience go down? Would you want to briefly talk about some of those changes that you brought in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Parvesh. I think as a company, we were formulated on technology as an enabler for our entire proposition. So what Dr. Mathur was also referring to, right? So the entire idea of technology weaving into business processes was thought since conception. And that is how, we have at least built our supply chain. And because it's so critical and essential to it, a lot of the technologies that operate the supply chain processes within Tata 1mg are actually proprietary. So we had to, and there was a lot of debate and argument around that on why should we not take off the shelf solutions, because if you think about our supply chain, it's highly disaggregated at the user level. And all the way up, when you go, it has to start getting aggregated in terms of holding inventory, warehousing processes, and then all the way to supply partnerships, right? So it's literally like the only thing that we don't do is manufacturing. So so during pandemic, I think a lot of this helped us in terms of foundations. Now, of course, no supply chain is immune to a peak or a shock of this nature. And in fact, we learned a very key difference between, the difference between what is robust and what is resilient. And it's a subtle difference, but it's an important one, right? So most supply chains are built with the idea of sometimes robustness, because the assumption is that the world will continue as it is and things will happen in an incremental fashion. So as long as your supply chain is robust and can handle, most of the, minimal variations, I think it's good enough. What pandemic taught us was that if your supply chain is not resilient, which is if it doesn't adapt quickly to the shocks that you're subject to or your supply chain is subject to, then then you'll realize that you would be completely unprepared for the pandemic, right? So during the time of pandemic, I think we were. I wouldn't say that we were not impacted or we maintained the same service levels, but I think we had built in a reasonable amount of resilience in our supply chain in terms of slowly adapting, or rather quickly adapting within the period of, I think, 3 to 4 weeks, where there was a period of about a week when literally there was, or 2 weeks, in fact, when there was confusion, highly disrupted supplies, both in terms of inventories at our warehouses to last mile disruptions and so on and so forth. But I think because we had this technology structure, we could actually prove our resilience. We were able to quickly get into the details of how to manage supply, how to build inventories, or shore up inventories, as most folks have already alluded to, so that we don't we changed from that just in time mode to stocking up inventories. Our systems were able to give real time info on which geographies was the demand peaking more than the others, and so we could readjust supplies based on where the demand was. And then, given that we had an entire technology link all the way up to last mile, we could also ensure and track where things were breaking and where things weren't. And so we could be very targeted and surgical in responding and fixing things. Because of which, I think in a period of just 2 to 3 weeks, we were actually back to very similar service levels that existed pre-pandemic. And this is with the same sustained peak, which had hit us 3 weeks earlier.
Got it.
And we could handle that.
Parvesh, if I can just come in on one of the points that Tanmay makes.
Yep.
If you really look at transformation today in an Indian context, as far as technology is concerned, look at the application and usage today of chain of custody, including traceability. We've all seen this healthcare business pre-pandemic, and we will see it post-pandemic as well. But if you look at the kind of precision and the kind of scrutiny that those processes required for everybody to have, I think that in itself shows how quickly technology has been able to create that change process and that transformation in as far as India is concerned.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'll actually simply summarize. Very well said, Tanmay and Vikram. Thanks for adding it, saying that, technology actually is a foundation for a robust kind of supply chain. And little bit of that agility or adaptability brings in, the whole resilience part of it, specifically, built for these extreme, some of the unique events, right? I think it gives a fairly good perspective overall. Srini, if I could come to you, let me try and pick up one of the questions from the audience which is coming in. I know there are quite a bit of those, but let me try to pick up one. It says that what logistics practices could have helped in the better management of medicine supply situation in the second wave? And what are the plans to get ready for future, assuming that we have a third wave coming our way? Any insights, thoughts would you want to share around the whole execution side around logistics? Dr. Mathur did speak about the whole need to try and have one single unified foundation across primary, secondary, last mile, or a multimodal kind of environment. But any insights or the best practices would be good to hear from you.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And in fact, actually building upon the other speakers, they were talking about just in time and so on and so forth. After first wave, if the question is talking about we had the second, and what are the things we could do to actually look at the third wave? As cliched as it may sound, Parvesh, let me tell you, and a lot of us, including myself, we have spoken about just in time. Our mindset and thinking has to be just in case. We have to shift our thinking from just in time to just in case. What I mean is that, just in case of the third wave is happening, and that's exactly the question from one of the audience, what is it that we need to do? Yeah. Now, coming to the specifics of what exactly do we need to do, in my personal opinion, that, all these kinds of drugs, which are very specific to the COVID therapies or whatever you may call it, having a central place, irrespective of who the manufacturers are. And I would say that, there has to be a consortium with respect to the government also included in it. None of the companies, to be honest with you, none of the companies, not just around the table here, but around the world, want to actually make any profiteering out of this particular situation. Not because it is not nice to do so in this context, but people know it very well that this is not something which is sustainable, number one, and therefore it is not good to actually make profits out of this situation. It makes pure business sense. So coming to very simple thing, I would say that there has to be a central pooling of all the resources, not just by one company, but all companies, and then use agile transportation systems and actually do that. We also hear, for example, also we need to kind of be very flexible with our contracts. What I mean is, take a case in point of, let's say, the Moderna vaccines, which are about to expire in the United States, about 5 million or 10 million of them. Just because the contracts have been written in a manner that you cannot transport it outside of the United States and use it for people, you're actually bound to it. Now, one has to be a little more flexible with all these kinds of things, yeah? Because there'll be from various strata, various locations. We need to be very much ready from a logistics perspective to create a central pool and be able to ship it across. That's one of the things which I would say. Yeah.
Sure, got it. So actually, you bring in a very interesting dimension, Srini, if I have to just add. So you are not only saying that we not only look at a logistics supply chain execution layer, which covers a gamut of those areas which Dr. Mathur highlighted, you are taking it to the next level, saying that it could possibly bring in an element of a multi-enterprise collaboration in a global context to be able to bring in efficiencies or reach or, take it to the next level, essentially, right?
Absolutely, and that's
very, very interesting perspective.
New, which I am talking about. It's exactly what even the vaccine manufacturers did. The only way vaccines were being able to kind of brought to the patient so fast is because of multi organizations actually collaborating together.
Got it. Perfect. Nigel, just last comment from your side. Would you want to highlight saying that basis what has happened over the last 12 to 18 months? What are you seeing could be some of top one or two things strategically which can make a huge difference in the way pharma in particular or manufacturing in general are looking at trying to adopt some of the best practices on the logistics side from the supply chain execution standpoint? Any one or two callouts which are large strategic things which could make a huge difference?
Thank you, Parvesh, for the question. I'd just like to thank Mr. Sreenivas because everyone on platform to serve the cause, I think, is ideal. Given the fact that everyone are regional players, I think coming together would definitely help. With regards to the futuristic plan, so I think building a more elastic network or a capability, I think, is what would be the need for all of us in terms of logistics players as well as the manufacturers, wherein we adapt to the situation that exists in a sense, because you said it's a new normal, right? So we do not know what the playing field or the rules are. So in terms of being elastic, where we can pull and push certain processes and ensure that the deliverables are met with, I think in terms we need to be more innovative in terms of our solutions as well. So bring a lot of technology in, because that is something that would help us predict and envision the case scenarios and build, I would say, resolutions around them in order to get the deliverables done. So I think this is what we would need to look at as collectively, as a solution provider as well as a manufacturer.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nigel. I think we are bang on time, so I don't want to take a lot of time. Let me just wrap this up by saying I think some of the thoughts which came from the panelists in terms of learning. One, I think technology has to be the foundation and the key. Second, we have to try and be ready for a more dynamic or a agile kind of supply chain environment rather than a historical steady state kind of, planned and executed kind of environment. And third, I think key takeaway is to try and see how do you get your entire transportation warehousing being looked at in a comprehensive way to be able to bring impact of technology in the way you run your execution on the supply chain sides, right? Thank you so much everyone for participating in the session. I would actually want to, before I wrap up, give a specific or a special vote of thanks to all the panelists here, not because of participation and sharing the comments here or sharing your thoughts. I really realize that we have a spectrum of participation from the organizations which produce vaccine, drug, distribute from commerce perspective, last mile, as well as try to help or collaborate, partner with the pharma companies to be able to ensure that they reach patients, consumers, specifically in some of those unique, difficult situations as India has experienced over the last few months or so. So really a special vote of thanks from my side, as well as possibly from everyone from the country, to the organizations that you represent and the kind of value and impact you have created, saving lives, in some of those difficult situations. So really, really appreciate. Thank you, gentlemen, everyone for participating and sharing your thoughts. I think these insights were very, very useful, and I'm sure the participants will take a lot of these insights into execution as they prepare and ramp up, for what we call it as the resilient supply chains from execution standpoint, as the organizations gear up, for a post-pandemic next normal, as I call it at. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Parvesh.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for an engaging discussion. And a special thanks to the panelist and the moderator for being here with us today and making this possible. And another thank you goes out to all our attendees as well who are here today with us. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll be back in a moment with the next session. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.